What's up, man?
Welcome
What's going
back.
on? Is it crazy or is it God? With another week of wonderful reading the Bible.
Yeah.
All right. How was your week?
Oh, my week was jam packed, busy, Izzy. Okay, so full disclosure, I am noticing. So when we have busy weeks, or really when I have busy weeks, we alter our reading schedule. And on the weeks when we have a normal reading schedule and we're reading every morning, I notice that I have a better day, right? I feel like I'm more mentally and emotionally prepared for the day, and I'm taking more account of how I'm feeling, how I'm treating other people. I'm just in the word. So it's just like, okay. And I was missing that this week because we had an altered reading schedule. But also, when we did read, I felt that sense of calmness and that sense of peace. Literally, I can't explain it. It's just, I know I had a stressful week. I got through it. It wasn't dire, but it was missing something. And then when we read, I was like, why did I deny myself this peace? So my week was good. I was just really focused. I have some things that I would like to incorporate. We talked about as
Mm-hmm.
far as the morning routines, but overall, I had a really good week. It was productive, and I'm starting to get a schedule down
Mm-hmm.
with some work stuff and with some other things I'm working on.
Oh, okay.
So that's good. But I do miss the sense of peace in the morning. So that's one of the things that we
Mm-hmm.
talked about with our morning routines
Mm-hmm.
that I could benefit from. Definitely reading in the morning. It's fine to read whenever you read, but reading the Bible in the morning just helps me throughout the day and thus throughout the week. So, yeah, noticing that. But overall, good week. How about you? How was your week?
It was interesting. The only reason it was good is because God is good. So what I mean by that is I can't complain if I wake up every day, right? So, but this week I didn't go hard as I want to, and my morning routine wasn't implemented as much as I wanted to be, and I could see how it would affect my day. My morning routine was off this week, and I realized that when I'm on my morning routine, I am tired, but I'm so much more focused.
Mm.
My body feels good because I worked out. I connect with God. I visualize. I say my affirmations. My affirmations have God in it. My visualization board has God in it. I journal. I write my goals. I have an accountability book. I meditate and I pray. So, like I was telling you, when I visualize, it's me connecting with God because that's how visualization and meditation to me and prayer is. Is
Mm-hmm.
you connecting to God because you're sitting in silence. So the only person that you're going to connect with is God.
Mm.
That's the
Well,
only
yeah, if you're praying, I
if
guess.
you're praying
But
or sitting there
it's some other
meditating.
things that could come into your mind too.
It is.
But the way that you do it, I see what you mean by that.
Yeah. So right, I visualize, right? Then after I visualize, I pray. And it's like with everything else, it's raw. When you start to journal, when you start to pray, you start to meditate, just like you said, right? So I pray and then I meditate. When I meditate, it's crazy things come in your head, but you have to, the more you do it, it's like exercising, it's like walking, it's like riding a bike, it's like driving. The more you meditate, the more you're able to focus.
Mm-hmm. Repetition.
Repetition, right? Just focus on your breathing in silence. And I think that's connecting with yourself and God as well, right? Well, it's about an hour and 20 minutes that is no phone, no emails, no TV, no social media. It's just me being with myself and God. And then that makes, I think it would make anybody's day go better. If you just spend time without social media and you work out, you meditate, You visualize, you say your affirmations, even if it's for 30 minutes. If you do a 10-minute workout, you journal for 5 minutes, you say your affirmations for 3, you visualize for 5, you meditate for 3. Do it, because it brings such a peace and happiness, kind of like motivation. I'm not saying it's made up, but it's not something, it's very obtainable, but you have to work at it. You have to, being happy is a mindset. So the more that you connect with yourself, the more that you know what you want. The more that, because your vision board and your affirmations are geared to what you want.
Mm-hmm.
And what God wants. So if you're focused on that the first thing in the morning, you work out, you're healthy, you write your thoughts out by journaling, you say your affirmations, you pray, you meditate, your day will, I guarantee it's going to be crazy at first because it's something that we don't do. But if you do it, your day goes by so much better. You start thinking differently. And I didn't incorporate it this week, and I saw a huge shift in my mood, in my communication, how I would talk to myself. So I'm not doing that again. I didn't like it.
Sometimes those things can feel like less of a priority or less pressing than other things externally happening, but I get what you're saying. Yeah, it's a part of having a good day. It's a part of having a good life. You know what I mean? So I completely understand that. So overall, your week was, it was
good.
So-so.
It was good. That's good because I woke up. Listen, you can't complain if God wakes you up.
Yeah.
I'm not where I used to be.
Yeah.
So I can't. Just even down to the little things like having a reliable car.
Yeah.
Didn't used to have that.
Yeah.
So I know. And people know that my friends know. So and your parents, my parents. That just happens.
Yeah.
It's so I can't be like, oh, I just know that I have to appreciate the lesson. So the lesson is get your butt up and do this because it makes your overall day better.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well.
Yeah, that's it. That was long.
Well, it's real, so we needed that.
We got a interesting. This is very interesting, guys, because we're ending out Genesis, and the end, it was kind of finishing off the story of Joseph, and then it gets good, and then it's the cliffhanger for next week.
It's a cliffhanger like a mud.
So Genesis 46 through 47.
Wait, let's talk about what we read. We read Genesis 46. Sorry, yes. We read the end of Genesis from 46 to 50, mm-hmm. and then we went to Exodus 1 through 6. Yeah. So it's 2 books here, but
the ending of one, the beginning of another.
Mm-hmm.
So 46 and 47, the tribe moves to Egypt, and this is Jacob's whole family. Mm-hmm. Jacob provides well for all. Joseph takes care of the whole family, basically. Provides them with everything they need. And he helps a lot of people survive. Now, Joseph forgave his brothers because his brothers were important to his own success. Right? It was. If they would have never put him in that position, I don't want to say it, but it's true, he wouldn't have been in the position he was over all of Egypt.
Well, yeah, and he said that, right? Mm-hmm. Joseph had said at one point when he forgave them that you meant you're doing for evil, but God made it for good. Mm-hmm. Because he was able to save a bunch of people because he came up with the idea to have the reserve. Mm-hmm. He interpreted Pharaoh's dream, and then God interpreted through him, and then he was able to sort of pre-plan before the famine, and it mm-hmm. saved all these people from starving mm-hmm. to death. So,
all right, Faith.
Yes.
Whom do you need to forgive?
Wow. So first it says Joseph's forgiveness of his brothers was important to his own success. So with that frame of thought in mind, I mean, the answer is everybody. I need to forgive everybody, but I don't hold grudges like that. I do sort of collect information that I feel that I'll need later, but I don't hold grudges. But I guess, who do I need to forgive? One, myself, because I was just doing this voice note earlier about how I talk to myself sometimes, and it's not even like I'm so mean, like a bully, but I am critiquing myself on things that aren't even critical, or they're not even criteria. They're not even criteria for meeting the goals that I have, but I'm critiquing myself on it. So it's like, I use the example, because we watch a lot of those cooking shows. I use the example of...
Love cooking shows.
Yes. I use the example of Chopped, right? Mm-hmm. It's like I'm making decisions based on what's in my basket and the amount of time that I have. Mm-hmm. So if I'm blaming something that I already knew, right? Everybody has the same, 20 minutes. Why are you making risotto? So there's some decisions like that that's like, okay, what made you think you could pull off a risotto in 20 minutes? Now you done stressed yourself out when you didn't have to go there. Or even just like preparation. Sometimes I won't
or grabbing too much from the pantry.
Yeah. Preparation, using everything in the basket. So I don't know. I went there with that analogy, but basically I'm saying I need to forgive myself for things that are, one, out of my control, and like focusing on things that are out of my control it's just not a smart idea, because how likely am I going to make change with things that are out of my control? Whatever I can do, I could focus on that, and that would be a better use of my resources. So I'll say I need to forgive myself. I hope that's not a fluffy answer, but that's what I'm... Final answer.
Okay, that's my final answer. Forgive myself, and that's the cliche. But it's not. I don't know where that came from. Because it ends with you and God. So if you forgive yourself, you can forgive others.
It's like giving yourself grace. Here's the thing about forgiving yourself.
You have to.
You can move on now, right? You don't have to just play back all your mistakes or all your, I should have been more prepared and I should have blah, blah, blah. Okay. Yeah. Now I'm forgiven. What do I do next time? How do I prepare moving forward, right? It's like, okay, moving right along. So then I guess that's really Joseph's forgiveness of his brothers was important to his own success, because then he could just focus on what's next. What's it gonna serve him to say, no, I don't forgive you, and now that dad's gone, I'm gonna make your life miserable. First of all, that's more work for him. It's more that he has to keep track of. It's like, look, we're trying to move forward here, right? Yeah. So forgiveness can be a way of moving forward. Right.
So forgiving yourself is not a cliche thing, because you got to think, even though we're married, you still spend more time with yourself than anything else, or besides God,
you spend more time. Yeah,
you spend more time in your own head, in your own thoughts. And what is it, 70,000 negative thoughts a day? Of course. So I don't know whether it's cliche to forgive yourself. Yes, do it all the time. It's that important. Because with Joseph, piggyback off what you said, if he doesn't forgive his brothers, can you imagine he gets sold into slavery, and all he's thinking about is revenge on his brothers, he wouldn't have been in the position he would have been in. Because so that grudge would have ate him up, would have made him bitter, would have made him angry. And once again, anger leads to everything else. As we keep seeing it come up over and over again. It's one of the worst things you can do, because it leads to jealousy. It leads to... You ever heard the term, I was so angry I blacked out? It just leads to bad decisions. So, all right, now... I'm sorry, guys, these allergies.
No, that's good. I wanted to say that, I forget the quote, but it's where thoughts go, energy flows. Like, yeah, just thinking about all he went through when he was Joseph, when he was in jail, and he had to, when he was working for Potiphar, and then if he wouldn't have been on his toes, he could have gotten caught up in so many situations, but he was just, it seemed like he was just focused on God, and God was working through him. So that would have held him back if he was just thinking about revenge. So yeah.
All right, so now we're at Genesis 48 to 50. And the highlights was Jacob blesses Ephraim and Manasseh. Manasseh?
I would say Manasseh.
Manasseh. Those are Joseph's sons.
Mm-hmm.
Jacob blesses each of his sons individually. And then it's the death of Jacob, and then later down the line, the death of Joseph. Here's the thing. Here's the question. What strikes you as the most interesting about Jacob's blessing of his sons?
You want me to go first?
Yeah.
Okay. What strikes me as the most interesting is that, first of all, Jacob, who's also Israel, kind of broke down to Joseph before it happened. I'm going to bless your sons as if they're my sons. And so that was the first thing that kind of stuck out at me, because I was like, okay. So then he went back and he blessed his own sons. Jacob did, Israel.
Wait,
but
the reason is that he blessed Joseph's two sons.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, because Simeon and Levi killed.
Right. Then he goes and basically, he didn't judge them, but he kind of just spoke over them like, here's what you do, right? You're angry and you're this, you're like a lion, you're like a whatever, right? And he was just telling them all of their personalities, basically the observations of their lives, right? This is what you represent, and this is why I won't be blessing you, right? So it was kind of interesting, because I was like, wow, this is somebody on their deathbed. I would have to imagine that was a hard thing to hear. You know who you are. You know what you do. Simeon and Levi went and killed those people.
Crazy.
So, and it reflected poorly on Israel, on Jacob, because it's like, this is what I bore. You know what I mean? These are my sons, and this is what they do. So, it kind of sucks, but it's like, these are his kids, and this is what they did. So he was just basically holding them accountable to say, here's what you did. So it struck me as interesting, because he was just like so honest with them, and he wasn't trying to save anybody's feelings. He was literally just, here's who you are, and this is why you will not be getting a blessing. And, good luck to you.
Yeah.
And then he went down the line and kind of just did that. But when Jacob blessed Joseph's sons, it struck me as interesting that he blessed the younger one and said that he would be, I guess, can't remember exactly, greater, more, I was
his
translating
nations are
more successful or something, but I don't know if that meant more successful. He said he'll be greater, because Joseph tried to correct him, like, wait, you got him backwards. Yeah. Apparently he had to cross his hands, right, to bless them both on the head, but he used his right hand for the child on the left. So it's like, oh wow, he was like, no, this is on purpose. Yep. Right? So, and it's interesting to me, as we're reading through Exodus, they'll reference back, and they've been doing this the whole way through, but in my version, the Amplified version, they'll reference back to a verse in Genesis before, where they're like, this was already spoken about, right? This is what's going to happen in the future. So when I would go back and read, I think it was 15:7 or something, don't quote me, but I was like, oh, this is now happening, but it was already spoken about. It was already predicted or prophesied. So it's just like, wow, this is actually coming to fruition. So I thought those things were interesting.
Jacob was Israel. He was just honest. There's no cutthroat. I had to ask Faith what happened with Reuben.
Yeah.
And then she broke it down and told me that he had sex with Bilhah, which is his dad's servant. He didn't know his dad knew, but his dad called him out on his blessing.
Yeah, they just put that right in there. It was literally one little snippet of a verse. It was like, while Jacob was away, and this was way back, I think it was right after they had killed all those people.
Mm-hmm.
And
it was Genesis 35, yeah.
And Joseph was getting a little bit older, and I guess Jacob left town for something. And when he came back, he had gotten word that his son had slept with one of his. It wasn't his wife, because remember he was married to Rachel and he was married to Leah, but I think it was Rachel's maid or something like that, her servant. And remember, Leah and Rachel were kind of competing and giving Jacob their servants to lay with so they could have more kids. But that actually ended up working for their good too, because then it was like 70 of them total at the end of the day. But it was, they slipped that right on in. It was Genesis 34 something.
Here it is. I got it right
here. What was it?
Genesis 35.
Genesis 35.
Verse 21 to 22. I'm going to read it. Then Israel journeyed and pitched his tent beyond the tower of Eder. And it happened, when Israel went to dwell in the land, that Reuben went to lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard about it.
He heard about it, but he must not have said nothing about it, because he said something about it when he was blessing them on his deathbed. He was like, "Oh, and I know what you did."
And I know what you did. That was
Which
interesting.
Is wild.
It's literally like 2 verses, and I was like, "Wow, did that really happen?"
I remember that.
And Faith was like, "Yeah," and then we went through that's the good thing about the Bible. And then it's very interesting. I did want to go over Jacob's sons and their descendants. Now, here it is. This is, right? Reuben, none. Sorry. Oh, Jacob had 12 sons, right? Reuben, none of his descendants were known. Simeon, none. Levi, Aaron, Moses, Eli, John the Baptist. Judah, David, then the man Jesus. That's the man, you know. Dan, Samson. I believe that's Samson, and Samson's one of the greatest warriors ever in the Bible. Naphtali, Elijah, and Barak, Gad, Jephthah, and they have a question mark. So I don't know if it's tied. Asher, none. Issachar, none. Zebulun, none. Joseph, Joshua, Gideon, Samuel, Benjamin, Saul, Esther, and Paul. Now, remember when God said to Rebecca, you'll have your twins are fighting in your belly, you'll have two nations. The younger is going to be greater than the older. And then now we see why the descendants of Jacob, which is the bloodline of Abraham, who bore Isaac, who bore Jacob. So when God told Abraham that your descendants, this is how great God is. He basically told Abraham, your bloodline is going to be great. God knew his bloodline was going to lead to Jesus and David and Moses and John the Baptist and Samson and Joshua and Samuel and Saul and Esther. So that's it. You're just going to have great names.
Out of you.
Yeah, it's going to have great names. We haven't even got to David, how phenomenal he is, and how phenomenal John the Baptist. I believe didn't John the Baptist baptize Jesus? I think he did.
We haven't gotten.
We haven't gotten there yet, but I might have. I might have heard.
I mean, maybe you've read it.
I might have heard that in the scripture.
Yeah, we're just reading this.
And John the Baptist is great, but so we'll get there. And I'm just saying that God promises. Now, once again, I'm going to say this. It's on his time, not ours. God created time. So when he says something, we get so impatient and want stuff. And it's been through life. It doesn't matter what era you're in. It doesn't matter if you're in the Facebook era. It doesn't matter if you're in the era with our parents. Everybody's impatient, and it just, I think it stems from eating the fruit. That's just me. That's just me. It's just we're impatient. It's a human in that, because we saw it with Abram, and Sarai.
Yeah.
They were impatient. So guys, don't worry about being impatient. Once again, patience is a hard skill to learn. Mind my words. This isn't just. This is not just.
It's a practice.
It's a
for
practice.
Sure.
It's not just
None
like.
of
It's
I
not
mean,
fluff,
I can't say
you
any
know?
of us have it down. The older amongst us, right? The older people, our elders, are probably the most patient, if I'm just going to generalize,
Yeah.
right? Because they've seen more. They know it takes a long time to do stuff. I think our generation and beyond, right, after us, we're probably the most impatient for a couple reasons. Number one, we kind of not just got here, but we don't have enough life experience to compare ourselves to the elders. But then also, after the 90s, everything just got super fast, right? It takes less of time to like build buildings, right? I just feel like sometimes I'll be downtown and I'll see like, oh, I saw this 3 months ago and it was on stilts. And then I'll drive past something, it's a whole building and people are in there. And I'm like, wow, this just happened in the last few months.
Yeah.
But, and I could be exaggerating, maybe it's more than 3 months, but we take
right.
things are quicker now, right? So we're expecting things to be quicker, right? When we purchase things, we want them quicker because there's Prime, right? When we
2-day delivery, yeah.
When we go to restaurants, we want our food quick, right? Because we are used to microwaves and we're used to fast service. That's a thing. I don't think that was the case back in the 70s or 80s even. It's just like, it takes time for something to happen.
Right,
it takes time for a check to clear. Now we have credit. Put it in right away. Apple Pay. Come on, get it done. Right? I don't have time for this.
I just used Apple Pay the other day ordering something and it was just so quick. It was just like ding ding.
Even I find myself even impatient about using the computer. If I get that little time circle that goes too long, I'll be like, what's going on? Can you imagine?
You are right.
Being a Hebrew, talking about where's the Wi-Fi?
Yeah, I can see that because you're right. And two, I remember growing up when we were growing up in the 90s, right? We weren't born in the 90s. We were growing up in the 90s, so we were able to see cell phones. Cell phones went so fast. The internet was like, next thing you know, was AOL dial-up, and then next thing you know, my dad's talking about Wi-Fi. It's like, what?
Yeah.
It goes so quickly. The video games, it was Nintendo, and the next thing you know, it's N64, and the next thing you know, it's PlayStation and Dreamcast. Like, CDs were here and gone so fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was VHS, then it was DVD, then it was Blu-ray, and now it's streamed.
Wow.
It's so quick.
Yeah, it's so quick. I mean, I think about how long they must have had 8-tracks, and then we had cassette players for a minute, but it doesn't seem like we had CDs for that long in comparison to how long.
Yeah.
I remember I just saw something like this on the internet on social media where I remember listening to the radio and having my cassette player right there. So when my favorite song came on, you got to hit those record buttons. And but it was so funny because it's like you had to wait. You had to wait for your song to come on the radio unless you had the cassette. Even if you had the cassette, you had to wait for that thing to rewind. You had to rewind. You had to rewind that tape and hope that you knew exactly how long you needed to hold the rewind button to get to the song you wanted to get to.
You had to wait.
Anyway, we're just sounding so ancient right now.
People would drop out a single. You would hear a Kanye West single, or a 50 Cent single, Eminem single, or a Jay-Z single, or Beyonce single for a minute. And then you will be pressed for that CD.
Can't wait till the CD
come out. Can't wait till the CD come out. Now it's like once the singles hit, the album has to drop. I blame Beyonce for that.
I proud of her for doing that.
Dropping straight.
We can break it on a whole other topic.
Anyway, guys. All right, let's get back on. Okay, so now we're at Exodus. The
whole thing was that we're a lot less patient than we used to be, partly because of the times that we're in. We're with the information superhighway and the accessibility to everything.
Yeah. It's a harder skill to learn.
Yeah.
Okay. Exodus 1-3. All right, now
we're in Exodus.
Between Joseph and Moses. So Joseph passes away and he blesses everybody. He took care of his whole family. Mm-hmm. He moved them, talked to Pharaoh, Land. Pharaoh was like, take this land, everything. Israel gets oppressed. The birth of Moses. Moses murders and flees, and Moses at the burning bush.
Introducing some more haterade. First haterade was probably introduced with Cain and Abel. We saw what happened with those two brothers. But what happened with, okay, here's the thing. Joseph was so dope. Everybody knew who he was. Pharaoh had his back. When he brought his family there, it was 70 of them, right? And they set him up with some land right outside of Egypt. And so Pharaoh was taking care of them and the family. He was like, y'all are straight, whatever y'all need type of thing. But when that Pharaoh died and a new king came over Egypt, he didn't know Joseph. Mm-hmm. He didn't know that, oh, y'all had a deal and you've been taken care of and you're highly regarded. So they looked at Joseph's family. So this is after Joseph passes away already. They didn't know who he was. They didn't really care. Mm-hmm. And they saw all these people who are not Egyptian, who are living right here outside the land, and
they were multiplied. They were fruitfully it was a lot of Hebrews and Israelites. I'm sorry.
And they said to them amongst themselves, the Egyptians did, there's so many of them. What if they get together with our enemies and overtake us in war? It's so funny. It reminds me of American history, but it's like you're going to attach your thinking to a group of people who hasn't done that, right? So you're just going to assume that, oh, they could rise up against us one day, so we're just gonna do something about it now, just in case. So you're going to oppress some people based on the fact that you're scared of what they might do if they ever were to think like you, right? So I just thought it's actually rather disturbing, but I see that it's a pattern of thinking of people in power, right? I'm not saying all people in power, but I feel like it's something that's kind of playing out present day, where you're going to assume that, oh, if you were to be in power, this might happen and that might affect me. So let me preemptively do something oppressive or something unfortunate. So even before you even get to the point where you're thinking about doing something, you know what I mean? And that might never happen. So with someone thinking like that, I just thought that was interesting. But so the Egyptians basically oppressed them
for no reason.
For no reason other than they were different and that they were large in numbers.
They were just minding their business.
They were minding their business. They were working the land. They actually asked the midwives of the Israelites to start killing the sons. Right? So, okay, let the daughters live, but when you see their babies being born, as you're helping them with their babies be born, kill the sons. Everybody who's male that's born, dead it, right? And then the daughters you can keep. So that was interesting to me too, is that the midwives were like, okay, but then they're like, we're not going to do that. So they didn't do that. And then they ended up telling them that they're like, how are you letting all these boys be born? And it's like, oh, well, they just give birth so quickly. We aren't able to catch it. And God was blessing them. God was with them as they were making sure that they didn't take out those orders.
They feared God.
They feared God. Yeah. That's another distinction, right?
They definitely didn't, kill the babies. And one of the babies happened to be Moses. But I agree with you. They oppressed him for no reason. And it is happening in the present day. For some reason, people, when they get to a certain hierarchy, love power. Which, if you want to be honest, it's only here for a second and then you're gone. You can't leave anything. Right? You can have generational wealth, but that can be squandered. You don't really know.
Right? Let's pick that apart for a second.
Right? So it's like the power that you think you possess. It's just, to me, it's just that people want to hold on and not spread no knowledge. And that's the opposite of what, from what I'm reading, that's the opposite of what the great people have done in the Bible So Joseph spread his love, right? And I'm not talking all people in power, but it's a lot of people that hold on
Mm-hmm.
and oppress
Mm-hmm.
versus Joseph. Get it, spread it.
Right.
Everybody eats. My family eats. I'm taking care of my family. I'm taking care of the land. I'm taking care of Pharaoh. Everybody was cool,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when you have, remember Isaac, that happened to Isaac. Isaac kept finding water. And it just got to the point was like, he's just blessed. But
Right.
he spreaded it. He said, you know what? I found this water. You can have it. Then he went to go dig up another portion. Oh, some water? We want it. You can have it.
Which is real wild because they ended up filling in those. They before that they had filled in the wells that his father dug
Yeah.
or his grandfather dug. I can't remember who it was, but
Yeah.
out of hate. But look, let me just go back to your
Yeah.
thing about power
This is
because
crazy.
I'm just gonna go back to the truth, right? I'm gonna go back to the facts. I'm gonna go back to what the Bible says
Mm-hmm.
and what I'm noticing, right? So the people who are in power, like Pharaoh, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Pharaoh that Joseph worked with saw that he was blessed and therefore was like, oh, and everybody that Joseph came in contact with pretty much was just like, oh, we see that you're blessed. Come be around us so that we can be blessed too, right? And they mentioned this thing about your God and the God of your father and the God of your father's father, right?
Yeah, a lot.
So it's obvious that they're not accepting him as their God. So it's interesting when you talk about power because, yeah, people in power, it's like that's their God almost because it's like they're not serving another God. The thing that keeps Joseph, Abraham, Jacob / Israel, right, walking a path is their allegiance and obedience to God.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not living for themselves. They're not
Yeah.
governing themselves. So they know that, okay, this life is temporary.
Mm-hmm.
Because guess what? We've seen everybody else expire. So,
Guaranteed.
so
Can't live
other
forever.
than Enoch, which nobody ever found him, so they said God took him, right?
That's a whole.
That's a
Enoch is
whole
a
different
whole
scenario.
man.
But
He was walking
everyone
with God every
who
day.
we've ever witnessed live, once they get to a certain age or something happens and they pass away, we don't know any 200-year-old people, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe you do, but I don't know of them. So that are alive today. So we know this is going to happen, but for some reason, when you mention certain people in power, specifically speaking of the people in this book, in the Bible, in the book of Genesis, it talked about how the pharaohs were not necessarily, it didn't speak of them following God.
No.
Maybe they had another thing that they were following, but we haven't read that.
No.
So, but we know that Abraham, we know that Isaac, we know that Jacob, we know that Joseph were all praying, following God, following God's instructions.
Yep.
And they were known as being blessed. It's like you can't go somewhere and not know who these people are. They're blessed. You know, and so then what starts to happen with Moses, which we're getting ready to get into, is interesting because now we start seeing sort of signs, but it kind of speaks to the idea that people have to be convinced, right? The days of people understanding who God is, those days are kind of almost behind us. And it kind of reminds me back to when we talked about after the flood, everybody was so careful and they're like, oh, can't do that, you know, because they knew about what had happened. But it's like the further people get away from these sort of miracles and God's power being shown, the more they start to self-govern. And so we see that with this new Pharaoh when we get into that, how he was speaking. And we even see it amongst the Israelites where it's like they have to be convinced. But just to sum up that point, it seems like people in power sometimes are not governed by God. They're not acting on their obedience to God. They're just acting on their whimsical desires, I suppose. Right? Yeah. So that's just something that I don't
No, I agree with you because I think that happens a lot. And if we're seeing it now, how far is society removed to God? Because I'm starting to notice in the Bible, people are saying, you just said it. People are starting to say Abraham's God, the God of your fathers.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, Faith, they still say that to this day.
Mm.
Do you think, growing up in the church, you think that you follow certain people that everybody believes in God? That's further from the truth, unfortunately. And it is what it is, because if it's happening back in the Bible, it's definitely happening now. So, I mean, it's just interesting that power is. It just seems like it's people that have it a lot oppress. It's a rare breed where you get the Job who gives away everything, and he works hard and has wealth, but he's a very praying man. He gives away everything. He's fair to everybody. He gives clothes off his back. He helps people out.
Mm-hmm.
We're not. This isn't. We're not saying it's everybody. It's just if you go down the list, start looking, you might be like, oh, how many people in power actually give more than they receive?
Mm.
All right, so now we're gonna go to. We're still Exodus, so we gotta talk about Moses was born, and they kind of had to hide him and put him in a basket.
Yeah, because they were killing sons
in the Nile, which is crazy because if you go, I can only imagine the Nile still had crocodiles in it.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even think about
and
that.
Hippos, and wow, the Nile is it's a good river. It has fish in there, but I know it's wild. So
yeah,
God had to be Moses.
Yeah,
and then he went into, I think it was it Pharaoh's palace?
Yeah. So Moses sent up the Nile. One of Pharaoh's daughters took him in and had her servants take care of him, and she raised him in Pharaoh's, I guess we could call it palace. I don't know
Probably
what
it's
it's saying. But then Moses
grew up as an Egyptian.
Yeah, as an Egyptian within their household. Yeah. But he knew he was Hebrew because when he went out into the fields and saw his people being beaten and tried to be killed and stuff, he actually went and killed an Egyptian in defense of one of the Hebrews. And he thought nobody saw it. So then later he comes back and one of the Hebrews was fighting with another one, and Moses was like, "Hey, what's going on? Why are you doing this to each other?" And then the guy actually said, the Hebrew guy was like, "Oh, do you intend to kill me like you killed the Egyptian?" And that was shocking because we thought nobody saw that. But it's like, okay, I just didn't understand why the dude would even say that.
That is deep on so many levels. That's a whole different.
You say that? I was trying to help.
That's a whole different podcast in its own.
Yeah,
of how deep that is.
How
especially in a black community. That is. I'm just trying to help y'all out.
Oh my gosh.
It was him. It's just y'all. You understand? It is huge, and it is deep in a black culture of helping out, and then we turn our back on each other while being oppressed. That's all. Yeah. That's a whole different. That's an 80-hour podcast right there.
So the only reason I brought it up was because when Pharaoh heard about that happening, right, then he was trying to kill Moses. So Moses had to get out of there.
He had to go, man.
Right? He had already been raised in the and
I don't think
household.
He was kind of liked, you know.
So
think about that.
So then he was like, "Oh, they're trying to kill me. I gotta go."
Yep.
So he went and found some people that helped him, and then they took him in, and the man gave him his wife Zipporah,
Yep.
So then Moses saw this bush burning.
Mm-hmm.
That was a miracle because he noticed that the bush itself wasn't on fire.
Yeah.
It wasn't burning up. It was just a fire coming out of a bush. So he was like, how is this happening? And it was God revealing himself to Moses,
Mm-hmm.
giving him instruction. But he was curious about that. This isn't right. This is scientifically, this isn't possible.
Burning bush in the
But
body
he
light.
noticed that, like, okay, this is God. So, because God actually said he had announced himself.
Mm-hmm. So after we went through all of that,
right. So God was telling him, you're going to help the Israelites become free. Mm-hmm. You're going to help them get away from underneath oppression from Pharaoh and the Egyptians. And Moses was so hesitant. He was like, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh, that I should bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? And then God responds back to him, certainly I'll be with you, and this shall be the sign to you that this is who I've sent you. Mm-hmm. Right? Like he did a bunch of things that showed him that he was going to help him. But Moses kept saying, are you sure it's me? Surely you mean somebody else. I can't speak well. I can't do this. I can't do that. Almost in so many words. Why me? Are you sure, God? And it was like,
well, that's cool here too.
That's interesting.
So here's the question. Look at what questions Moses asked God. Do you ever feel afraid to ask God about things? And what are you afraid he will say? So, I'm going to be honest. I'm afraid to ask God what, like, so, okay. I feel like I know God's will for me. I'm just going to say that. This is one of the things. This podcast. And I'm going to be honest. I'm kind of afraid to be obedient to him. Right? Mm-hmm. I'm kind of, if I ask God, what do I need to do his will, I'm afraid of what he's going to ask me to do because I don't think I can do it. Mm. Yeah, I don't think I can do it. So that's another one of my things, that I'm insecure about myself, of how that I can make this work. Just how Moses is saying. And what will he say? Do as I ask. Don't worry about everything else. Yeah. But with me, I think that's it. I think I need to be myself more, and sometimes I don't think I'm the smartest guy in the room when other people say I am, but it's maybe God, you know, God is probably like, have more confidence, be more vocal. This is who I want you to be. Mm-hmm. You can command the room. People will listen to you through me. Yeah. So that's what I know what I'm afraid of. So.
That was a very honest answer.
Yeah, it was tough.
I applaud you for that. That's very vulnerable of you. It was tough. So let's move along. No. No.
See, I wasn't going to let you off the hook.
Do you ever feel afraid to ask God about things? Yes. A lot of times I feel afraid to ask God about things that I desire, like approval, right? We all want the approval of our peers and our parents and our community. I mean, yeah, our communities, it's not even, I mean, yeah, I guess it is a sense of validation, but even when you get the validation, it goes beyond that. It's when you continue validation. It's the best example I could use is music. When you're an artist, right, it never ends. You are expected to write and perform, or you're expected to write and produce and record an album better than the others, right? So you want yours to chart number one, right? You want yours to perform other than all the other artists out there in your category. and you want your music to be impactful. Okay, so now you've made an album, it's number one. Now they want you to go and perform your album, probably live, right? So now you got to get together a whole band and a whole crew and hope that the lighting people are having a good day, and you got to perform live in front of live audiences, in front of cameras, syndicating out to, reaching out to all these people, millions, billions of people. Okay, so now you're a good performer. Okay, great. Now we want you to tour, right? Now you have a successful tour. Not only do you have to have a successful tour, but everyone who comes to your venues needs to be safe. There better not be any mishaps. There better not be any danger. There better not be anything that goes wrong there. Then we're going to expect you to not getting caught up in any scandals or anything like that, because now your image is going to be ruined. And we need you to do all the right things, all the right times, show up to all the right interviews, always look good, always sound good, always having a good day, always smiling, always thanking your fans, right? And even once you do that and you pull an old Beyonce or Alicia Keys, now they want you to do it again. And this time, we want you to do it better than the last time. So this album has to be better than the last time. It has to be written better. It has to be performed better. It has to be everything better than the last time. And then if you do that, guess what's after that? We want you to do it again. Only this time, if you switch it up, you're going to lose some folks, because this isn't what we expected of you. We expected you to be like you were on the first album, right? And there's only so many songs you can create that sound like the first album before you evolve into your third album self, right? They want you to continuously do this, and in our culture, keep your youth about you, keep your edge about you, while still not getting into scandal, right? It's just this whole thing is the more you produce, the more that is expected from you. I'm sorry, and I know I ranted there for a second, but I don't know. With me gaining more information and gaining more knowledge, I kind of feel afraid to ask God about the changes that I need to make, because I wonder if I'm capable. And I'm afraid he'll say, do it anyway. Right? Kind of what you said. I'm afraid that the approval or the sort of validation is not going to be enough. And it's going to be like, okay, well, you have to do it anyway. And you're going to have to go through this time where you're not going to have any validation. You're not going to have any approval. You're going to be out there. But I promise you that on the other side, you'll be fine. I don't want to hear that. But if that's what God has, then that's what God has. We talked about this before we, started recording this podcast. We're not pastors. We're not Bible school teachers. We're not Sunday school teachers. We really don't have anything other than what you have, which is a Bible and a camera, and we're not claiming that we are. We just literally are trying to be obedient. And so it's a little scary sometimes to jump out there and try to do something that first you've never done before, and something that might produce some sort of expectation, because then you're like, okay, well, what does that come with? Does it come with having to be a better person than I am, right? When people expect things of you, how do I keep up with that? So it's interesting, because I feel, to answer your question, and I know I went all the way on a tangent, but to answer the question, I feel afraid to ask God about what's next, because I barely feel prepared for what I have on my plate, right? I'm just sort of learning to be good at being this version of me. So, and I know God is going to be with me, but it's still this fear of messing up or doing something out of pocket and being human. So I'm afraid he'll say, go through it anyway, and I'll be with you. And the thing is, yeah, I know he'll be with me, but do we really want to go through stuff? You know what I'm saying? I can't lie. I'd like to have it as pleasantly as I can. So that's what I fear about asking God about things, and that's what I'm afraid he'll say.
All right, so Exodus 4-6. Moses questions God. We already kind of covered that, right? Moses returns to Egypt. Double work for the slaves. God promises redemption. It breaks down Moses and Aaron's generations.
Yeah, genealogy, yeah.
And Aaron speaks for Moses. So this is a lot that happens. So Moses questions God, like Faith said. He's saying that he can't speak well. And God's like, no, do as I ask. And he's like, God, but what if they ask, who are you? And he says, I am that I am. No, there's no, just do, basically do what I ask. You have
like
to
your
trust
mama
me.
used to tell you, do it because I said so.
Yeah, just trust me. But it's something you touched on earlier where sometimes God has to show us how powerful he is. So Moses has this rod. God turns it into a staff.
Whatever it is, I don't know.
God turns it into a snake. Then God's like, pick it up. He picks up the tail of the snake. It turns right back into a staff. Mm-hmm. God says, touch her in her chest. Moses does. He removes his hand and it has leprosy. And God was like, touch her chest again. And Moses does, and then the leprosy is gone.
I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. It is.
I thought he said his hand turned white.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. I didn't understand that. Okay.
Yeah, it was a disease, yeah.
Okay.
This is what goes when you say earlier, like, God has to show you who he is for us to believe. And he shouldn't have.
Mm-hmm.
He's just saying, I'm God. And we all do what Moses does every day.
Don't we now? Speak with me.
I do it all the time. I just broke down to you of how I'm insecure, how I don't think I command the room, how my intelligence, and I feel like God's like, do it. Just trust me. You're built for this. I created you for this. So everybody always questions God. And I feel like every time God is like, do as I ask, and I got you. Mm-hmm. Moses isn't the first one. Jacob wrestled with God all night long.
Yeah, which I thought was a metaphor as well. Yeah, wrestling with him.
All night. The only person, it's not the only person, a couple that I think just went with God. Noah, even Job complained, but I think Noah built the ark and was like, I got you. Joseph didn't complain one time. But even the great ones do. Moses is great, guys. Job is phenomenal. Just this is what happens when everybody questions God. And he's like, I got you.
Yeah, and I just want to piggyback on what you're saying. It's so easy to sit here and read and say, oh, wow, you shouldn't say that to God, right? But it's in so many ways we are doing exactly that, right? The same way that you know God wants you to be loving or forgiving, and then you go and make a different choice. Mm-hmm. Or the same way that you have this burning desire. And I do think that I get spoken to in my dreams. Sometimes I wake up with an idea that I hadn't ever thought of, and it's, I'm going to go and execute that, and it works. It's like if you go to bed praying and you wake up and you pray, but sometimes even before you get to wake up and pray, whatever's on your mind gets really clear. I don't know if this happens to other people. Does this happen to you when you wake up and you just have this burning desire like, I got to go act on that, or I got this great idea?
Yeah, they talk about
sometimes that. Just out of sleep, I just get the best ideas. Yeah. A lot of times people say too, they get really good ideas in the shower. But it's when your mind is on something else and then God can just speak to you, or when your mind is quiet probably. Yeah. God can just speak to you. And I think even when you have those ideas, or you might even be an entrepreneur or business owner, or even working for somebody else, and say you have this great idea, and then when it's time to implement it or speak up on it, there is this hesitation. It's, I don't want to fail, or I don't want to sound stupid, or I don't want to change everything and then everybody's looking at me, or I don't want to put my idea out there and then people judge me for my idea, or I know that it's not going to be. And see, Moses has a specific instruction to go and release some people, that is not as easy as, hey, start this business where you're baking cakes. Because everybody loves cakes, right? But you're telling me to go to Pharaoh and tell them to let these people go, these people that he's been having in captivity. That sounds so crazy, right? So I get why he was hesitant. I get why he was like, hey, wait, God, please tell me that you're gonna go and do something right before this, so I don't, this sounds really risky, you know what I mean? I can only imagine how that sounded. So it's so easy to look back and see, oh, he should have just obeyed God. But we're doing this all the time.
Yep.
You know, there's so many things that happen to us that we're just kind of like, well, my favorite thing to say is, maybe later. Like, not today, but yeah, I hear you, God. Great idea. We'll figure out how to get some people on that.
Why tomorrow? Mine is I'll do
Oh
tomorrow.
my gosh, yeah. I do not like it when he says that. I'll be like, hey, let's look into this thing. And he's like, or I'll be like, watch this excerpt, watch this video. It's so informational. And he's like, tomorrow. I'm like, tomorrow. Expired.
Just tomorrow, man.
Why tomorrow? Like, why though? That's my thing. But anyway, we do it all the time. Is my point. We do it, all of us, you included. You're listening to this, you do it all the time.
All the time.
God tells you, and we're including ourselves in this, God tells you, hey, go do this, or go forgive this person, or be nice to so-and-so because they need your compassion. Yeah. And what do we say? Tomorrow. Yeah. Maybe later, or great idea, God, but, right? It's always something. So I just feel like this is really interesting because the things that God is asking us to do are probably not as risky as what he's telling Moses to do.
Yeah. And so Moses goes, and then Pharaoh actually doubles the work for the slaves.
Oh!
The Hebrews. I don't like that.
Yeah. I mean, no, they were slaves. No, I wasn't reacting to that. I was just thinking how that must have felt.
Yeah. Like, dang it.
It must have felt like, okay, God came and spoke to me. I'm going to react in response, in obedience. And then the first reaction to your obedience,
double the work,
is something that is not favorable to the people that you're trying to help. Double the work.
Which is, that's
wild. Double the work, and less resources, and they're looking at him like, oh, look, thanks. Well, look what you did.
Yeah. Like, who are you? So Moses was obedient, and yet it looked like he was getting double work for the slaves. Have you ever obeyed God and it looked at first like things got worse? What happened?
Yeah. Being honest. I can think of a couple of scenarios where being honest was uncomfortable, and then the reaction to my honesty was not the most favorable, but later on it ended up being okay. So there's a way, when I say being honest, let me be transparent here. I'm not a mean person, but a lot of times I'll hold things in and they'll build up. And so then by the time I'm ready to release it, it's not as nice as it could have been if I could have, and I've gotten better at that, but it's not as nice as it could have been if I could have just come out with the information before emotion was attached to it. But even as I've gotten better with that, sometimes there's just not a ready ear for honesty. Sometimes you have to fight through your own thoughts, and when you deliver whatever you need to say, it's not met with appreciation. But then later, and the examples that I'm thinking of, later I was grateful for saying whatever I said. I was grateful that I was the one to say, not even the one to say it, but that it was said. Because in one instance, someone behind the scenes came and thanked me for saying what was said. Thank you, because I wanted to say that too. And I'm glad that it was said, right? Yeah. In other instances, I mean, it just feels good to be obedient, and it feels good to be like, okay, well, at least I said something. So it's not silence is acceptance type of thing. I definitely let you know that I disagreed, and or what the idea was, and so now at least you have the information moving forward, right? So yeah, that has happened before. Obey God, and at first it looked like things got worse, but it got better
Yeah.
after the fact. So
That was a good one. It's a couple instances where you okay. Be careful what you wish for, I guess that's what they say. So in this case, for some reason in society, going what with God says is looked down upon sometimes.
yeah, it's like you don't want to be. What do they call it? A Jesus freak?
Yeah, like
You
being
don't want to be
honest
looked at as
or
a yeah,
you know,
yeah. That's
like
a real thing. Yeah.
being honest or sometimes even praying for something, and God gives it to you, and you're like, I didn't expect it to be like this.
Mm-hmm.
And then you work through it, and then you look up and you're like, thank you.
Right.
Because sometimes you got to go through the dark to get to the light. Now, that happened to Joseph. It happened to Jacob. He ended up fleeing and worked for somebody for 20 years. It happened to Abraham. Probably happened to Noah. Definitely happened to Job. This is what I'm saying. It's gonna happen. Obeying God is not for the weak at heart. It's not for weak mentally, because it's gonna get tested. And I can only imagine that's that saying, blessed and highly favored, is real. Because from what I'm seeing, everybody is blessed. That God is blessed. They went through the real.
Mm-hmm. Right. You don't necessarily seek to be
Yeah.
blessed and highly favored, because all the people who are blessed and highly favored that we're seeing so far had to go through something wild and survive it. And I want to just go back and say something to that one thing you just said about obeying God is not for the mentally weak. I disagree. I think that it is. I think that it is certainly exponentially for people who are not strong, because in your weakness, God supplements. He is your strength. So I think I knew what you meant by that, but I just wanted to go back and address it, because this is probably the entire point, right? We are left on a cliffhanger, as you said, with Moses, but Moses said that he's not the best speaker. He has all these, weaknesses that he feels, oh, you shouldn't use me, God, right? But it's like, no, I purposely am choosing you. We just don't know why, right? We just don't know why he's choosing us for stuff.
I see what you're saying about.
But it's like when you don't have it, that's exactly when God is good.
Yeah, because Moses. That's what it seems like. You're right. So I wasn't trying to say it.
I knew what you meant. I just wanted to be clear for our audience.
Yeah,
so I know what he means, because that's my baby.
It's not. Yeah, I'm not saying you. I'm just saying you're gonna have to be mentally prepared. And even if you're not, you're going to have to push through, because God's going to test you.
God's got you, though.
He's got you. He's going to test, but he's got you.
Interestingly enough,
when Moses like, I can't speak, doesn't matter.
Going back to Jacob, when he left, and then God came to Laban and said, don't mess with him. You know what I'm saying? And he came and still asked him questions. It was this thought of, okay, God told you to go back to your land, but you keep hesitating because you really don't trust that God's got your back, right? You hiding, you're splitting up your team and all this.
Yeah.
And it's because he wrestled, and it's like, you're doing all of this because even though God spoke to you, you still don't trust. And I'm saying this with not even a grain of salt. I'm saying this with humility because I can relate to that.
It took him to have a physical altercation with God all night to finally realize, okay.
Yeah. Okay, I have to do this.
Yeah.
Right? And sometimes God will do that.
Yeah.
He'll just, if you're not obedient, he'll just keep putting stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You keep going through the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
It keeps getting harder or it keeps getting worse. And then you're just like, finally, okay, fine, I'll do it. Or you have to do it. You're in a position where now I have to do it. And it's like, it didn't even have to be that hard if you would just trust it. But that's just hard. It's just hard because we're humans and that's just what it is, you know? So anyway, we're left on a cliffhanger because we have seen that Moses has gone to request certain things, and the work has been doubled, and now God is basically saying, "Oh, you know, I'm going to take care of the Egyptians."
It's about to go down.
Right? You just understand that, yeah, his heart is hardened, Pharaoh's heart is hardened, and but I'm going to take care of them. All I need you to do is say what I said, what I told you to say, and show them what I told you to show them, so that my plan will be done. But yeah, I'm going to handle that. So we were left on a cliffhanger. I was really kind of on the edge of my seat. I want to read more, but gotta wait till next week for what happens next. You don't have to wait till next week. You are certainly welcome, and we encourage you to pick up your Bible and read along with us. Next week we're reading Exodus 7 through 18. So our next episode, which I think might be our next episode, might be our 10th episode. It might be our 9th. Let me not say that.
Oh, yeah.
So it's commemorative in a way. But we just want you to just don't take our word for it. Go to the source. Read your Bible. And so we do have a question for you this week. How have you had a situation when God has asked you to do something and be obedient to him, and you hesitated? It might be happening now, right? Are you hesitating? Have you hesitated before with something that God instructed you to do? And what happened to you? What happened in the situation, right? What did you learn? So yeah, that's our question for this week. We had a great time reading. Again, I have to say it's very fun.
Yes.
And the emotional connection, there are parts in this where I'm just like, oh my God, why is this me? Why do I think this same way? Or even more so, what would I have done in that particular situation? And kind of just feeling for these people who are going through this, right? And it already happened. It's in the Bible, but it's really interesting to just have this emotional connection and know that it's God's word and God is like speaking to us through his word.
Yeah.
So yeah, did you want to say something?
Yeah, man. So I loved it. They start off pretty slow, ending a legacy, and now a new chapter begins, and it's really good to see. This is the exciting part, so I can't wait. Also, I want to shout out Chanel Martin. I got you, Wardy. Really good.
You want to show?
Yeah. It's a really good brand. I'm going to shout him out on Instagram. It's pretty cool. My cousin is based in Atlanta. Chanel Martin. He's doing his thing. It's pretty nice. Loved it. Very professional. So that's it, man. Shout out to black businesses.
Shout out to black businesses everywhere. Well, thanks for joining us for another episode of IICIIG? Don't forget to read along. Don't forget to follow us on all of the platforms. We are wherever you are. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Wherever you are, look for us. Look for Is It Crazy or Is It God? Or IICIIG. We're also on LinkedIn. And you can find all of this in our bio, in our link tree, and wherever you follow us. Make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe, make sure you share, and let's keep this conversation going. I think there's a lot to benefit from us interacting with you. We want to know what you think. We want to know what your thoughts are as we're reading this together. And even if you're not reading it and you're just listening to it, that's okay too for now, right? We want to know what your thoughts are and whether you have some of the same questions we have. So,
all right.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.
Peace.